Assalamu alaikum. My name is Moaz Ahmed, and in this video I will be explaining the lab number 9 of microcontrollers and embedded systems. This lab is about the implementation of serial communication USART of Atmega 328P. In this lab, we were required to introduce and implement the serial communication in our course through a task and to design a circuit that allows us to communicate between two different microcontrollers. The main concept behind this terminology is that we want to use one microcontroller for sending our input, and then we want that microcontroller to send that data that we passed as input to that microcontroller, and we want it to pass that data to the second controller, and we want the second controller to output to provide us the output. In our task, if I scroll down a bit, and you can see here on our Proteus file. So here you can see that we have two microcontrollers. One is being connected to the LCD right here, and the second one is connected to the hex keyboard. These two microcontrollers are acting as master and slave. So if we have a look at the working mechanism of this task, we will be providing the input from the hex keyboard to this controller, and this controller will send that data to the second microcontroller. The second microcontroller will display the output according to our code to the LCD. So if we have a look at the slave code right here, in the slave microcontroller, we will be using the first of all the libraries, and then we will be initializing the LCD, and then we will be using the DDRB, which means port B is currently being used. We will set the fourth bit to 1, and SPCR will have the SPE pin as 1, and while 1 is true, which means forever loop is being used, and while SPSR and SPIF, which means the interrupt flag, is not on, we want it to continue in the same line as long as the flag is not on. When the flag turns on, we want it to display the data that it just received after being communicated, after the communication that was being done by the other controller. We want it to display that data to the LCD. Now, if we have a look at the master code, so here we can see that we have defined some variables and functions like send data, and character U is being passed as an argument. Then we have the initialize as master code. Then we have the database, which is a double array, or we can call it. Then we have the four characters A1, A2, A3, and A4. And then we have another function, search. Then we have defined some new variables like R1 is equal to 0, C1 is equal to 0, and X is equal to 0 for our operations. In the main code, first of all, we have initialized the code as a master. Then we have defined the port D as first four bits to be output and second four bits to be input. And we are sending the port D a value of 0x0f. And then we are calling the forever loop. And in forever loop, we are calling another forever loop for checking our conditions. So we want to store the input on the last four bits that we just received from our port D. So x is equal to pin D, and we are storing that input in an x variable. And then we are implementing if x is not equal to 0x0f, which means this condition is not, which means that if this condition is true, we want it to break the loop as long as this condition is true. Otherwise, we want it to stay in the while forever loop. And then we want the port D to be 0xEF, x is equal to pin D, which means x is the current condition that we want to be checking. Most of these codes that you see right here are for our hex keyboard inputs. As we discussed in the previous labs, that hex keyboard has 4 rows and 4 columns. Each row and each column interact with each other at a certain point. And when two specific when one specific row and one specific column are on, which means the number that they are interacting at will be turned on. So all of these are conditions for that specific inputs. And in our Proteus file, we can see that whenever a button will be pressed, that button will similarly will be displayed right here. So for our hardware implementation, we can see it right here. We can see that as soon as we press a button, the same button number is being displayed on the LCD. So that's it from this video. I hope you learned something valuable. Till next time, Allah Hafiz.